"We haven't eaten in 5 days," the widow whispered. The rancher handed her bread and his last name. The year was 1867, and winter lay over the Wyoming frontier like a great white shroud. Snow blew sideways across the open plains, carried by a wind sharp enough to peel the courage off any man who dared linger outside after dusk. It was a kind of cold that entered the bones and stayed there, the kind that sucked the life out of livestock, men, and hope alike. Most nights, the world seemed dead by sundown, but on this one, a quiet rancher named Caleb Rourke heard a knock on his door long after every sane soul should have been asleep. He stood from the wooden table where a single lantern flickered, throwing uneasy shadows across the cabin walls. The knock came again, 3 taps, uneven, weak. Not the confident rap of a trader, not the careless pounding of a drunk. Something strained lived in that sound, something desperate. Caleb reached for the shotgun leaning against the wall, the metal cold under his fingers. He stepped silently toward the door, boots whispering over creaking floorboards. Outside, the wind howled like a pack of hungry animals. He paused, listening. The knocking didn't come again. For a moment, he wondered if he'd imagined it. This land could twist a man's hearing. But then a faint voice broke through the storm. "Please, someone. Please." Not a man's voice. A woman's. Trembling. Frayed at the edges. Caleb lifted the bar latch and opened the door a crack. Just enough to see who dare approach a stranger's homestead on a night like this. The lantern behind him cast a thin spill of gold that reached the snow-strewn porch and lit the face of a woman on the brink of collapse. She looked half-frozen, her skin pale as the moonlit drifts behind her. Snow clung to her lashes and tangled dark hair. A worn shawl clutched around her shoulders did little to hide the trembling of her body. But it wasn't her alone. 2 small figures huddled behind her, clinging to her ragged skirt like barn swallows hiding from a storm. We haven't eaten in 4 days, she whispered, the words barely reaching him through the wind. The shotgun lowered. The door opened wider, and the sight that met him struck him square in the chest like a horse's hoof. The woman's feet were wrapped in strips of cloth instead of boots, her dress torn and stiff with frozen mud. The children were in no better shape. One a boy of maybe 8, jaw clenched in stubborn silence. The other a little girl, no older than 5, too cold even to cry. Their cheeks were sunken, their eyes hollow. Caleb didn't think. His body moved before his mind. The sure instinct of a man who'd once watched helplessly as sickness stole the person he loved most. He stepped aside, holding the door open. "Get inside. All of you." The woman blinked as if she hadn't expected kindness, as if she'd brace herself for a gunshot instead. She stumbled across the threshold, her knees buckling. Caleb caught her by the elbow, feeling the heat of fever burning beneath her icy skin. The children staggered behind her, tiny shoulders shivering beneath threadbare coats. Caleb shut the door and dropped the iron bar back into place. The storm rage dulled to a muffled roar outside. Warm from the wood stove spilled across the room, and all 3 newcomers sagged toward it like dying flowers turning toward the sun. "Sit by the fire," Caleb said, already crossing the room to grab what little food he had. His pantry wasn't exactly full. Winter never allowed for that. But he scooped a handful of dried beans, tore a chunk from his last loaf of bread, and poured milk into a tin cup he hoped wasn't too cold for their throats. It wasn't enough for 4 people, but it was something. He handed the bread to the woman. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped it. She tore a piece off and gave it not to herself, but to her children. The little girl devoured it like a starving fawn. The boy tried to slow himself, chewing as if embarrassed by his hunger, but he couldn't hide how ravenous he truly was. "You need to eat," Caleb said gently. "All of you." The woman's eyes lifted to his. Through the exhaustion, through the fear, something like shame flickered there. She took a reluctant bite of bread, swallowed hard, and closed her eyes as if the taste hurt her. "My name is Anna," she said quietly. "Anna Daly. This is Samuel and Lily." Her voice cracked on the children's names. We're not trouble, just lost, and tired." "Trouble or not, you're freezing," Caleb said. "You'll stay by the fire tonight." Anna opened her mouth to protest, but her knees buckled again. Caleb reached out instinctively, steadying her as she swayed. That close, he could see bruises beneath her sleeves, old ones yellowing and fresh ones darkening at the edges. She noticed his glance and pulled her arm back quickly, eyes dropping to the floor. Caleb didn't ask. Not yet. He handed a wool blanket to the children, then gestured to the chair closest to the fire. Anna sank into it, her face illuminated by the warm glow. The crackling of the burning logs filled the silence. Slowly, color returned to her cheeks. Still, Caleb sensed a deeper storm inside her, one that warmth alone couldn't fix. When her shaking eased enough for her to hold the cup, he poured another ladle of warm milk. She drank it slower than the children did, but with the same desperate hunger. After several minutes, she spoke again, her voice steadier but laced with exhaustion. I'm sorry to trouble you this way. I didn't know where else to go. You came from the west? Caleb asked. Anna nodded. From the old trail road. It was safer when we started, but we lost the wagon. Then Owen died. Her breath hitched at the name, and she looked toward her children as if to shield them from the memory. Your husband? Caleb asked softly. She nodded. There was a fight at the trading post. Men arguing. I thought it'd blow over. But a gun fired, and then everything fell apart. Those men, they didn't stop at threats. They burned our supplies. Our horses ran. Owen tried to shield the children. She swallowed hard. He didn't survive the night. Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough death on the frontier to know how fast it came and how unfairly it chose. Those riders, Anna added, voice lowering to a trembling whisper. They saw us flee. I think they followed us for a while. I kept hiding the children. We ran when we could. We walked when we couldn't. I wasn't sure we'd live to see another sunrise. Caleb glanced toward the window. Snow piled high against the glass. No tracks would be visible tonight. But danger didn't vanish just because it couldn't be seen. You're safe here, he said. He meant it, and yet he felt the unease curling in his stomach, like a coiled snake. Anna studied him then, her eyes searching his face as though trying to decide whether or not she truly believed him. The firelight softened her features, brushing warmth across her cheeks, though her exhaustion still showed in every line. Why help us? She asked suddenly. Not defensive, not ungrateful, just bewildered. Caleb looked down at the floorboards, the knots in which swirling under his gaze. Because once years back, I needed help and didn't get it, he said. My wife died that winter. Sick. I did everything I could, but there was no one left nearby to lend a hand. I buried her alone. If a stranger had knocked on my door then, I'd have given anything to save her. He didn't know why he said so much. He rarely spoke of his wife. But something about the hollow in Anna's voice scraped open a place in him he thought had long since scarred over. Anna's expression softened. Not pity, just understanding. Shared grief needs no explanation. Before either could speak again, a faint sound rose over the storm, a distant crunch of snow, quick and heavy. Hoofbeats. More than one horse. Caleb froze. Anna stiffened, clutching the children closer. The hoofbeats drew nearer, slow but deliberate. Circling the cabin, Caleb moved the oil lantern and snuffed it out. The room sank into near darkness, lit only by the dim red glow of the fire. He grabbed his shotgun and motioned Anna and the children toward the wooden shelf built into the far corner, a small alcove where shadows pooled deep enough to hide them. Stay quiet, he whispered. Anna pushed Samuel and Lily behind her, shielding them with her own body. The little girl held back a sob, pressing her face into her mother's skirt. Outside, the horses shifted, snorts, stomps, the uneasy restlessness of animals sensing something beyond their rider's command. Voices murmured, muffled by the storm. A lantern flickered, faintly through the frost-blurred window. Caleb cocked the shotgun. Silence. Then a boot crunched in the snow right outside the door. Another step. Another. A gloved hand brushed the doorknob. Anna's breath hitched so sharply Caleb heard it from across the room. He steadied himself. If that latch lifted, he'd shoot without hesitation. The barrel pointed straight at the door, his heartbeat pounding like a blacksmith's hammer. But after a long moment, the footsteps retreated. Someone muttered something too distant to decipher. The horses turned. Hoofbeats faded into the storm. Caleb didn't move until the sound was swallowed entirely by the wind. Only then did he lower the shotgun. Anna exhaled shakily. One hand pressed at her heart, as if it might burst free from her chest. Caleb approached slowly. "They're gone. For now." Her eyes lifted to his, glassy with fear and exhaustion. "They're looking for us," she whispered. "I know that sound. Those were the same riders." Caleb nodded grimly. He already suspected as much. "You'll sleep here tonight," he said. "All of you. I'll keep watch." Anna shook her head weakly. "I've taken too much from you. Your food, your fire, your safety." "You didn't take anything," Caleb said. "A man gives what he chooses." The children, finally warm enough to relax, sagged against their mother's sides. Lily's tiny hand slipped into Caleb's coat hem as he passed. She looked up at him with eyes too tired to shine. Caleb knelt to her level. "You're safe, little one." She nodded sleepily, her trust given far more easily than the adults. He helped Anna ease the children into a pile of blankets near the fire. When she tried to spread her own shawl over them, he stopped her and draped his thick winter coat across their small bodies instead. Anna stared at the gesture, as though it carried a weight she couldn't begin to put words to. "You should rest too," he said. "You're shaking." "Only from hunger," she murmured. He tore the last piece of bread in half and held it out. She hesitated, but when he insisted silently, she took it and ate, slow and steady, as though committing every taste to memory. The fire crackled, filling the silence between them. Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent to the fragile sanctuary inside the cabin. Anna's eyes fluttered as exhaustion dragged her downward. Her body tilted suddenly, knees giving way. Caleb reached her just before she fell, catching her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, too light, too worn. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely conscious. "You've nothing to be sorry for." He guided her to a folded quilt and eased her down beside her children. As she drifted into sleep, her hand reached instinctively toward them, fingers brushing their hair. Caleb watched her for a long moment. The widow who'd walked out of a blizzard with nothing left but courage and 2 starving children. A woman chased across the plains by danger he did not yet fully understand. A stranger who had stepped into his lonely cabin and stirred something he thought winter had frozen long ago. He turned toward the window. Snow hammered the glass, erasing the world beyond. But in the darkness, he felt the truth settle like a weight he was strangely willing to carry. This family had arrived at his door starving, hunted, and nearly dead. And whether he wanted it or not, their fate was now tied to his. He moved the chair by the fire, shotgun laid across his knees, and whispered into the quiet cabin. "Rest. I'll keep watch." Outside, the storm swallowed the tracks of the riders who'd passed by. Inside, 3 fragile lives breathed softly in the safety of his home. And somewhere deep within him, beneath years of grief and silence, something warm flickered to life again. He didn't know it yet, but before winter ended, he would give those strangers more than shelter. He would give them his future. He would give them his name. Morning crept over the plains slow and pale, like a wounded animal dragging itself across the horizon. The storm had spent itself some time before dawn, leaving the world outside Caleb's cabin buried beneath a heavy silence. Snow blanketed the ground in thick, unbroken sheets, smoothing out every track, every sign of life, every hint of the danger that had circled the night before. Inside, the fire had burned low, but its embers still glowed red, casting a dim warmth across the cabin floor. Caleb hadn't slept. He sat where he'd been all night, shotgun resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the frost-streaked window. His muscles ached, but he didn't shift. He didn't dare. Not while the fragile world he'd taken responsibility for lay, sleeping only a few paces away. The first to stir was Samuel. The boy sat up with a sharp, startled breath, eyes wide and hands clenched as if expecting to wake in the snow again. When he saw the cabin walls instead of darkness and wind, his shoulders slumped in relief. He tried hard to hide. Caleb pretended he didn't notice. Boys like Samuel learned early to carry burdens bigger than their years, and calling attention to it only made them retreat deeper inside themselves. "Morning," Caleb said quietly. Samuel nodded, still blinking off sleep. "Did they come back?" he whispered. "No. Will they?" "Maybe." Caleb kept his voice steady. "But we'll be ready." That earned a small, grateful look before the boy's face steadied into something determined. Samuel got up carefully, so as not to wake his mother or sister, and crossed to the window. He stared out at the whitened world with a seriousness no child should have had. Caleb rose stiffly, stretching his back. "Hungry?" Samuel hesitated a moment, but nodded. Hunger was a truth hard to deny. Caleb started the fire again, coaxing the coals back to life. Soon the room warmed, and the smell of boiling coffee mixed with the earthy scent of beans heating in a tin pot. The cabin, humble as it was, felt like a fortress compared to the merciless cold outside. Anna woke next, startled like her son had been, her eyes darting until she recognized where she was. Her gaze softened as she saw her children asleep in warmth rather than curled in the snow. Relief stole through her features, followed quickly by guilt. Guilt for accepting help, for needing it, for still breathing when her husband wasn't. "Good morning," Caleb said, pouring her a cup of warm water before the coffee was ready. "You look like you actually slept." She accepted it with trembling fingers. "I didn't mean to. I wanted to stay awake. Help keep watch." "You needed rest," he said simply. "You were exhausted." Her eyes dropped, embarrassed by her own body's betrayal. "Thank you. For last night. For everything." Caleb didn't answer. Gratitude always made him uncomfortable. He'd offered shelter because the alternative was unthinkable, not because he wanted credit for it. Lily woke with a soft grunt, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She stretched, then tottered toward Caleb with unsteady steps. Without hesitation, she lifted her arms for him to pick her up. Caleb froze, caught between instinct and uncertainty. But Lily didn't wait. She pressed her head lightly against his leg, seeking warmth and safety as easily as if she had known him forever. Caleb swallowed. Slowly, awkwardly, he lifted her into his arms. She nestled into his shoulder with a small sigh. Anna watched, a mixture of relief and something else. Hope, maybe, fragile and uncertain, flickering across her face. "Let's get some food in you all," Caleb said, more to ground himself than anything. He served the beans and torn pieces of leftover bread. It wasn't much, but the children ate eagerly, and Anna forced herself to take a few bites, though guilt twisted through every swallow. She wasn't used to taking anything she couldn't repay. When the meal was finished, Caleb stood and grabbed his coat. "I'm going to check the property. Make sure whoever was out there didn't leave any surprises." Fear crossed Anna's face. "You think they'll come back?" "They lost your trail in the storm," Caleb said. "But men like that don't give up easy. If they're after something or someone, they'll try again." Her hands tightened into fists. "They killed my husband. Owen didn't want trouble. He never raised a gun, but they shot him anyway. If they find us—" She glanced at her children and didn't finish the sentence. Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. "Then I won't let them." He stepped outside, boots sinking deep into the fresh snow. The air was sharp enough to bite, but clear. He scanned the horizon, wide and white, rolling into the distant mountains like a frozen sea. No figures, no horses, nothing but emptiness. But emptiness could be deceptive. He circled the cabin, then checked the barn. The 2 horses inside snorted softly, tails flicking. They sensed the leftover tension, as much as he did. Caleb stroked their necks, grounding himself in their steady presence. Tracks from the night's visitors had vanished beneath the snow, but he knew they'd been there, and they'd return. Back inside, Anna waited nervously, twisting the edge of her worn shawl. "Anything. Clear for now," Caleb said. "But I don't like not knowing who they are or what they want." Anna nodded. Their leader, he wore a red scarf tied around his arm. The others followed him like dogs. Owen said they'd been shaking down travelers on the trail for months. Payment for safe passage, they called it. But they didn't care about money half the time. They wanted fear. They wanted power. Caleb's jaw clenched. He knew the type. Men who used the lawless frontier as a shield for cruelty. Men who believed mercy was weakness. "They won't get near you," he said. "Not while you're under my roof." Anna's breath trembled. "You shouldn't make promises like that." "Maybe not," he replied. "But I made it anyway." The day passed quietly. Too quietly. Samuel helped Caleb chop behind the cabin, bringing pieces inside to restock the hearth. The boy was small but stubborn, refusing to be seen as weak. Caleb let him work, not because he needed help, but because he saw how much the boy needed purpose. Anna mended clothes, stitched torn seams, cleaned the cabin with gentle, deliberate movements. She couldn't repay Caleb for saving them, but she tried. Every small task she completed seemed to ease a little of her burden. Lily drew shapes in the frost on the window, humming softly. By late afternoon, Caleb felt something warm stirring in the cabin, something he hadn't felt in years. Life, noise, presence, not the lonely echo of a man living with memories. But danger didn't respect peace. Shortly before dusk, Samuel shouted from outside, "Mr. Rourke, someone's coming." Caleb grabbed a shotgun and stepped outside. The wind had picked up again, swirling loose snow across the ground. Through the haze, a lone horse approached from a ridge. Caleb's grip tightened, but the figure wasn't a bandit. As the horse drew near, he recognized the worn coat and familiar slouch of Mark Hanlon, one of his few neighbors, a cattleman from 2 miles east. "Caleb," Mark called, riding hard. "Storm wiped out half my fence line. Had to check on ya. Heard gunfire last night." Caleb exhaled slowly. "You heard right. Strangers rode close." Mark's eyes narrowed as he dismounted. "Trouble?" "Maybe more than trouble," Caleb said, glancing back at the cabin. Anna watched from the doorway, uncertainty in her eyes. Samuel clung to her side like a shadow, and Lily peered out from behind her skirt. Mark followed Caleb's gaze, taking the sight of the ragged family tucked into the safety of the rancher's home. "Oh," Mark murmured. "I see." Caleb explained in brief. Bandits, the attack on the trading post, Owen's death, the chase through the storm. Mark listened, face tight with anger. "Red Scarf Riders," Mark muttered. "Heard rumors of 'em. Nasty crew, led by a man named Vance Crail. Been shaking down settlers for months." Caleb had heard the name. Not much was said of Vance Crail that didn't drip with fear. Mark lowered his voice. "If they followed her here, you're sitting on a powder keg." Caleb didn't look away. "I know. You plan on turning her in? Send them on their way?" Caleb's eyes hardened. "No." Mark studied him, wary. "Then you'll need help. I can send word to a few men. Good men. We'll watch the ridges." Caleb nodded. "Thank you." Mark remounted. "Keep your lantern covered tonight. Smoke too. If they're scouting, we don't want to draw 'em in." He rode off into the gathering dusk. Inside, Anna stood silently as Caleb returned. "You told him," she said softly. "I told him what mattered." Her breath shook. "I don't want anyone else hurt because of us." "That's not your choice to make," Caleb replied. "These men, they're wolves. And wolves don't stop because you hide. They stop because someone stands up to them." Anna lowered her gaze, voice trembling. "Owen stood up to them. He died for it." Caleb stepped closer, eyes steady. "He didn't die because he stood up. He died because he stood alone." Anna's breath caught, her eyes shining though she blinked the tears away quickly. As night fell, Caleb barred the door, banked the fire to keep the light low, and set the shotgun beside him. Anna tucked the children into a nest of blankets. Lily whispered stories to her mother, small hands clutching tightly. Hours passed. The cabin filled with the soft rhythm of sleeping breaths. Caleb stayed awake long into the night, senses sharp, heart beating in a measured, steady drum. He listened for hoofbeats, for voices, for anything out of place. But the darkness held only wind and the distant groan of shifting snow. Sometime after midnight, Anna rose quietly and approached him. She wrapped her shawl tighter, stopping a few feet away, unsure she should speak. "You should sleep," she whispered. "Someone needs to keep watch. You can't keep going without rest." He didn't answer. Anna stepped closer. Caleb. Her voice softened, carrying a weight she hadn't allowed herself to share until now. I don't know why fate brought us to your door, but you've shown us more kindness in 24 hours than most people showed us in months. He looked at her, lit only by faint firelight. Her eyes were tired but strong, beautiful in a way shaped by hardship, not ease. I'm not doing this for gratitude, he said. I know. She swallowed. That's what makes it matter. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind moaned across the plains like a warning. Anna reached out and placed a gentle hand on his arm. Thank you, she whispered, for giving my children a night without fear. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. Not pain, not discomfort, but the stirring of something long dormant. You're safe here, he said again, softer this time, as long as I'm breathing. Anna nodded, eyes glistening. She withdrew her hand slowly, reluctantly, as though letting go of something warm in a cold world. She returned to her children. Curling beside them, Caleb turned back to the window. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Then, faint, barely audible, the sound Caleb feared rose from the distance. Hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, coming closer. Caleb's heartbeat went still. They're here, he whispered, and the night drew its breath, waiting for the storm to break. Caleb woke before first light, though sleep had barely touched him. The air inside the barn was cold, the kind that crept under a man's coat and made him feel hollow in places he didn't care to name. Anna and the children still slept near the embers of the stove, their breaths soft, almost weightless, as if any sudden noise might scatter them like startled birds. Caleb rose slow, boots scraping the packed dirt, careful not to wake them. Today would bring answers or blood, and he couldn't yet tell which. He stepped outside, closing the barn door with a quiet hand. Dawn trembled on the far ridge, thin as a blade. The world smelled of frost and horses, of danger too close to name. Caleb checked the saddle cinch on his bay gelding, feeling the old horse shift beneath his hand. The animals sensed trouble, they all did. Trouble had a way of staining the air. Behind him, the barn door opened. Anna stood wrapped in Caleb's coat, its shoulders too large, the sleeves swallowing her hands. Her hair was undone, falling past her shoulders in dark, tangled waves. Her eyes were still tired, but something inside them had changed since last night. Something sharp, something steady. You're going after them, she said. He didn't answer. Some truths were heavy enough without being spoken. Anna stepped closer, the cold turning her breath into a pale cloud. You don't have to face them alone. Yes, he said, his voice rough. I do. She shook her head. Those men came for my children first. They killed my husband. They burned my home. I can't hide in your barn while you risk your life on our account. Caleb wanted to explain that he wasn't doing this just for them. Some men live by laws written in books. Others live by the rules of the land. Caleb lived by a single truth. No child should go hungry because wicked men chose to make orphans. I need you here, he said. If something happens to me, you take the children and ride west. Don't stop until the world feels different. Anna's throat bobbed as she swallowed. Something's already different. Caleb looked away. Sometimes the truth struck harder than a bullet. The children stirred inside the barn, their voices muffled. Caleb swung into the saddle. Anna reached for his stirrup as if to hold him in place, but she stopped herself. Just then, a sound shivered across the valley. Hoofbeats, many of them, moving fast. Caleb stiffened. Anna's breath hitched. The children fell silent. Dust rose on the far ridge, shimmering gold against the newborn sun. Riders. At least 6. Maybe more. Caleb cursed under his breath. They found us. Anna stepped back toward the barn, hands trembling at her sides. Caleb wheeled his horse, heart hammering. Inside. Now. But Anna didn't move. She stood frozen, eyes locked on the ridge. Caleb followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. It wasn't the same riders from last night. It was worse. The McCready brothers, 3 of them, and their hired guns, men known for taking what they wanted and burying anyone who said otherwise. They were the kind of men who'd set fire to a widow's house for sport. And they were headed straight for Caleb's land. The lead rider lifted a rifle and waved it like a greeting. Caleb didn't wave back. Anna whispered, "We can't outrun them." "No," Caleb said, "but we can finish what they started." He kicked his horse into motion, closing the distance between himself and the oncoming riders. Dust filled his mouth. Wind ripped at his coat. Behind him, Anna gathered the children and pulled them toward the shadows. The valley sea aeried every sound. Caleb heard the metallic click of a rifle being cocked. He felt the wrongness settle over him like a second skin. Then came the first shot. It cracked through the morning like the world breaking open. Caleb flattened against the saddle, spurring his horse forward. Another shot. Dirt leapt beside him. He veered left, drawing his revolver in a single fluid motion. The riders spread out, fanning like wolves. Caleb fired once, twice. A gunman toppled, hitting the ground hard. The others roared, their fury rising like heat. Caleb didn't feel fear, only purpose. Fear was a luxury for men with less to lose. He swung wide, circling the riders to pull them away from the barn. If he died, he wanted the children safe. Anna safe. A bullet tore through his sleeve, grazing his arm. He clenched his teeth. Blood warmed his skin. The McCready leader, Dawson, charged straight at him. A massive man with a beard thick as rope and eyes like ice. He lifted his rifle and fired. Caleb's hat spun off his head. He fired back, but Dawson swerved, laughing. "You should have stayed out of it, rancher." Dawson yelled, "Ain't your business what we do with a widow." Caleb's reply was a bullet that clipped Dawson's boot and sent his horse squealing sideways. Another rider came at Caleb from behind. Caleb spun, firing point blank. The man fell, boots tangled in the stirrups as he was dragged into the dust. But Caleb was outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of ground. A rifle but slammed into his ribs from the side. Caleb gasped, nearly falling. He grappled with the rider beside him, yanking him down. Both hit the dirt. Caleb rolled, snatching the man's drop knife, and sent it into his attacker's chest. He rose, breath ragged, just in time to see Dawson leveling his rifle again. This time, Caleb was too slow, but the shot never came. A scream split the air. A small one. "Anna!" Caleb spun toward the barn. Dawson followed his gaze and grinned. Anna stood in the doorway, holding a shotgun. The children huddled behind her. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned with something fierce. "Leave him alone," she shouted. Dawson laughed. "Or what? You'll shoot me, girl? You ain't got it in you." Anna stepped forward, steadying the shotgun against her shoulder. "Try me." Dawson swung his rifle toward her. Caleb saw the moment stretch, thin as glass, ready to shatter. He ran. He didn't think, didn't breathe. He tackled Dawson just as the rifle fired. The bullet tore into the barn wall, inches above the children's heads. Caleb punched Dawson hard, dropping him from his horse. They hit the dirt together, rolling, choking on dust. Dawson was strong, stronger than Caleb had expected. His fists were like hammers. Caleb felt one crack against his jaw, sending stars across his vision. But Caleb had something Dawson didn't, a reason. He surged up, grabbing Dawson by the coat and slamming him into the ground. Dawson roared, swinging wildly. Caleb caught the man's wrist and twisted until the rifle slipped free. Behind them, another gunman charged at the barn, firing. Anna screamed. Caleb reached for Dawson's pistol and fired instinctively. The rider fell dead. Dawson clawed at the dirt, trying to crawl toward his weapon. Caleb pressed a boot between the man's shoulders. "It ends now," Caleb said, voice low. Dawson spat. "You ain't man enough to end it." Caleb tightened his grip on the pistol. His hand trembled, not from fear, from memory, of graves, of promises made to ghosts. Anna called out behind him, voice breaking, "Caleb, please." He stopped, looked back at her. The children clung to her skirt, eyes wide, terrified. They'd already seen enough death. Caleb lowered the gun. Dawson rolled suddenly, pulling a hidden knife. Caleb reacted faster, grabbing Dawson's wrist and slamming it into the dirt until the knife clattered away. He struck once more, knocking Dawson unconscious. Silence fell over the valley except for Caleb's ragged breathing and the soft cries of the children. The battle was done. Caleb stood slowly, wiping blood from his mouth. His arm throbbed. His ribs ached. But he was alive. Anna was alive. The children were alive. Anna stepped out from the barn, the shotgun still clutched in her shaking hands. She dropped it and ran toward him. Caleb caught her, felt her collapse against his chest, her breath warm against his neck. "You came back," she whispered. "I wasn't going anywhere." The children gathered around them, clinging to their mother's skirts and to Caleb's coat. He rested a hand on each small shoulder. He felt the weight of their fear, their hope, their trust. Caleb looked at the down men, some dead, some dying, Dawson unconscious. He would deal with them later. For now, the sun was rising warm across the valley, bleeding gold over everything it touched. Anna pulled back, tears tracing clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. What happens now? Caleb glanced toward the mountains, toward the long stretch of land that had always felt too empty for one man alone. "Well," he said, voice steadying, "I reckon we'll make a new start. Together." Anna's lips parted, a trembling breath leaving her. "Together?" she echoed. Caleb squeezed her hand. The children huddled close. The barn stood tall behind them, its walls scarred but still standing. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt something like home taking root. Not in the land. In them. The valley wind shifted, carrying the promise of a different life. One built not from loneliness, but from the stubborn, fragile hope of a family forged in fire. Caleb looked at Anna, at the children, and let the words come without fear or hesitation. "You're safe now," he said softly. "All of you. And as long as I draw breath, you always will be." Anna nodded, tears shining. The children leaned into him. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of the night. They stood together in the rising light, breathing hard, feeling the weight of all they had survived. Caleb steadied himself, knowing the road ahead would not be easy, yet certain they would walk it as one. Anna wiped her eyes, gathering her courage with each breath she drew. The children clung to them both, sensing the fragile peace settling around the homestead. The wind whispered across the valley, bending the grass in long, gentle waves. Hope, once a stranger here, began to root itself deep. They would rebuild.